John, do you want to make a start? Do you want to sort of introduce yourself and? John, do you want to make a start?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So my name's John Wood. I've been working for BaxterStorey for a long time. Sustainability has always been one of our core values. One area that I've worked on for many years is our university sector, which is an area that we've partnered with a number of universities over the years. And one of the core values there is improving performance here. I'm not the expert. Mike is the expert, so happy to answer any questions in terms of what we do within our universities. But passing on to Mike, who will start the show, as it were.
Thank you, John. First of all, hi, welcome. Thank you very much for allowing me to talk to you today. My name is Mike Hanson. I'm Director of Sustainable Business for BaxterStorey, and in fact, the wider WSH family, which is the overarching parent family of BaxterStorey. So it includes other businesses such as Benugo, CSEs, and some education business called Caterlink, Holroyd Howe, and a front of house reception management company called Portico. I've been with the company, well, actually, I'm in my 22nd year. I actually started as an operations manager. So I'm a caterer by trade originally. In fact, I was a chef in a hotel originally. And now I moved into sustainability in 2006 as a part-time role along with my operational responsibilities, and then went full-time into this role in 2012, just after I'd finished all our operational work, a lot of our operational work for the Olympics. So what I'll do now is I'll quickly share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, okay, good. Well, as I say, thank you very much. Great to be here. So, as I mentioned, started in 2006 in terms of where we were taking environmental management. A lot of contracts I was working with was government business, and within the government contracts, so DEFRA, DTI, as it was then, they had an ISO 14001 as an environmental management system, and I was used to it, and it seemed a very good place to start. So we worked hard on that. We actually worked hard on BS8 555, which was the steps to environmental management system, STEMS. We were actually, in fact, the first company in the world to be credited with STEMS with BSI. So that switched over to ISO 14001 in 2007. We added to our management systems portfolio in 2015 with ISO 50001, which is an energy management system, again through BSI. And that was predominantly as a main route to compliance for ESOS, which is the Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme. We've slightly moved up the dial on that. So actually we go through a lead assessor process now. It's more effective for our business. For the diversity of our business, including our Benugos and CSEs, etc., as retail, more of a retail service offer. But we decided we wanted to maintain the framework of ISO 50001 because it gives you an opportunity to understand aspects, impacts, and drive efficiency really well. At the same time as achieving ISO 14001, in 2007, we became a carbon neutral company. And then what that means is that we calculated our footprint, limited footprint at that stage across scope 1, 2, and 3. And we offset that through gold standard offsets through the carbon neutral company, which is actually now called Natural Capital Partners. But we maintained that for 10 years. And then in 2017, sorry, let's just put those slides in the wrong order. In 2017, we decided we wanted to maintain some carbon neutral certification, which we do with fleet and business travel, whilst moving all of our purchased electricity to 100% renewables. Although within BaxterStorey, clearly we're guests in our client's house, as it were, but certainly Benugo, CSCs, our production kitchens, our offices, etc. We do purchase electricity, and so we wanted to switch that over. And we're now, I'm pleased to say, whilst our target was 2020, we actually achieved that by the end of 2019 to have 100% REGO-backed renewable electricity. Just while we're on the subject of carbon, we joined the Race to Zero in 2021. And that's BaxterStorey signed the business ambition for 1.5 degrees. That's committed us to net zero using a science-based target approach, and has joined us on the Race to Zero, which was a really great stake in the ground. To help us do that, we've joined the Zero Carbon Forum, which is a hospitality-focused forum for basically the idea is collaboration. It's almost about not being non-competitive, working together. We all need to get to the same place, and there's no good being competitive about it, because we all need to get there. And we all know how complicated the hospitality sector is, and how diverse it is in calculating scope 1, 2, and 3, and particularly scope 3, so goods and services up and down the supply chain. We've just joined the UN Global Compact Climate Ambition Accelerator program, and we actually had a kickoff meeting yesterday. So that's a 6-month program of accelerating everything we're doing on our climate ambition. And I'll talk to you a little bit later about how that fits into our wider ESG strategy and our targets. The infographic on the bottom right-hand corner is quite an interesting one, and it's an analogy I really like to help people I'm talking to understand the impact of carbon and where we are in terms of carbon impact. And interestingly, what actually happened as a result of COVID and the lockdowns, where we saw a global reduction in CO2 emissions of around 7%. In fact, we'd need that year on year until 2050 if we were actually to get where we need to be. But basically, whilst we didn't, the carbon emissions dropped in 2020 due to less travel, no air travel, quieter roads, etc. What that did is it effectively turned the tap down on carbon emissions, whilst the carbon was already in the atmosphere. So if you imagine the carbon in the atmosphere is like a bath full of water, the bath was already full, and we had just turned down the tap. So we were filling the bath slower, but it was still full. What we actually need to do going forward, particularly as we move to all of our joint targets of net zero, is actually turn the tap down, eventually turn it off, but also let the plug out. So we actually need to let the plug out of the bath, so we actually start removing carbon, which is why net zero, the strategies behind net zero, is around reducing your carbon impacts and your carbon emissions on a massive scale, but also then not only offsetting the remainder through carbon avoidance, but also carbon removal. And that may be reforestation, afforestation, blue carbon, etc. And if you have any questions, incidentally, as we go through, please feel free to jump in, or indeed ask questions at the end. That's absolutely cool as well. Some of the connections we have as a business, and we've had for a long time and ongoing. I mentioned the UN Global Compact and Network UK. We actually became signatories of the UN Global Compact in 2015. We signed as BaxterStorey at that point, and just last year we upscaled our ambition, our signatory status, to WSH UK and Ireland, which, as I mentioned, is the parent company of BaxterStorey, to encompass all of our businesses, because we all need to be heading in the same direction. The UN Global Compact Network UK, you become a member of that by being a signatory of the UN Global Compact. But we were actually joined in 2018. We actually joined UK SSD, which is the UK Stakeholders for Sustainable Development, a group of businesses absolutely driven to implement the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And we joined to hopefully drive through not only our own business, but through the wider hospitality sector. Unfortunately, during COVID, they struggled with finance, so UK SSD folded. but the work is being picked up by UN Global Compact Network UK, of which we're members of anyway, and it's with them that we've just joined the Climate Ambition Accelerator Programme. Zero Carbon Forum, I've mentioned. It's a fantastic idea, fantastic collaboration of businesses. BaxterStorey is actually the only food service company that's a member. Other members are the likes of Green King, Fuller's, Intercontinental Hotels, Pizza Hut, Pizza Express, Burger King, etc. EcoVadis, you may be familiar with. EcoVadis is a sustainability ratings platform of which you submit your data. They provide you with a rating, and then you can share that data with clients as they request. Our submission in 2021 was for WSH, so the overall business and everything that comes out from our main office in Reading, and we achieved a bronze medal. And I'm excited to be able to drive that forward. And now we have a wider framework for ESG structure right across the business, which I'll come on to in a second. CDP, formerly known as the Carbon Disclosure Project, and we've been actually disclosing our carbon emissions publicly since 2006. So that's maintaining that, and our information becomes better, stronger, and more robust year on year. Which is great, and it's brilliant to be able to work with businesses that are actually sitting behind the whole framework of the Science-Based Target Initiative, of which CDP is. So, which is great. Probably one of the most exciting things that I found certainly came out of beginning of 2021 is we joined IEMA as a corporate partner. IEMA is the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. It is it's the main trade body, trade association, if you like, for sustainability professionals, such as myself. So I've been a member, I don't know, maybe for about 15 years or so, and the membership has opened up to become a corporate partner. So WSH has now become a corporate partner, which means we can use the logo, which is great. We can have C-suite level of engagement. So we have with other corporate partners. We can actually engage, so our CEO, CFO, and that level of board can meet up with other corporate partners at that level and discuss sustainability implementation within our own business, net zero targets and so on, which is absolutely brilliant. But the gem for me, and the main reason I wanted to sign up as a partner, was actually we can become an accredited training centre. So WSH is now an accredited IEMA training centre, and I'm the first, hopefully, of many certified IEMA trainers. That's to deliver initially 3 certified IEMA training courses. That's a 1-day environmental sustainability skills for workforce, a 2-day course for managers, and a 5-day foundation certificate in environmental sustainability. It's a fairly prescriptive course, but what the individuals get then is a co-logoed certified training certificate, which is all part of our plan to relaunch our Champions Network post-COVID, when everything fell apart, as everybody's aware. We're relaunching, but actually going to be rewarding those individuals with IEMA certified training. And that means that they not only get the tools to do the job, but they also get some personal recognition, some personal certified training. That training can take place on e-learning, can play face-to-face. It can be spread over a number of days or weeks. So, for example, the 5-day foundation certificate, you could do 10 half days as an example, and then there's self-study as part of that, and then an exam at the end. What we do for our clients, and this really stems from our management system experience of ISO 14001 and latterly 50001, and actually is based on the Deming cycle of Plan, Do, Check, Act. And what that means is that we need to start off with a baseline assessment, and that's to understand everything that's going on within a location, warts and all, from behaviours of the teams in terms of, are they cooking without a lid? Are they turning the oven on too early or too late? Is the gas being left on? Is the fridge door left open? Is the light switched off in the changing rooms? What type of food are they buying? Are they buying accredited, certified food? Are they aware of the packaging, etc., 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 across all of those areas? And from that, we can then determine objectives and targets, and what we can then report back to the client in terms of information that may be pertinent, not only for ourselves, but also in line with what really supports our clients' objectives and targets also. Client support, talks, roadshows, exactly, for example, what I'm doing today. Lunch and learn sessions are quite a big feature at the moment, and I do quite a lot of those on either on an overall awareness, on particular items, maybe on sustainable food or reducing road miles. I've done them before on sustainable palm oil and so on and so forth. And then training, also training and awareness. So I've actually done this before, where some of the training that I talked about, it'd be great if I can do the IEMA training, but some of the training modules we have, which is a standard, I say standard because we've had it a long time, but a suite of toolbox sessions called Green Flash. That is, the idea is that it's a 20-minute, a very collaborative, very informal session on energy and water efficiency or food waste management or waste and recycling in your location. The idea is that the teams can sit around with a cup of coffee after service or toward the end of the day and have a conversation about how could we be more efficient, where is our food waste generated, etc. So there's all these questions posed, and then the answers are in the notes sections. So it's a very, it's about having the discussion as much as anything else and raising that level, the general level of awareness. So there's a number of training sessions for each of those subjects. And we're currently going through a process of switching over those from the old clunky PowerPoint over to an e-learning platform, so people can have a look, watch the videos on their phones and all of that sort of stuff. Energy and water, we have, I mentioned, obviously, we've got ISO 50001, and sitting within that, obviously, we've reviewed all our aspects and impacts from an energy efficiency perspective. We're looking at energy in locations. So actually, in terms of our 50001 certification, it's very much for our own business, but we also include elements within your business. Although it's not the energy, we don't pay for that energy and we don't account for it. We have to make sure that we're efficient with it. We have to look after it and be as efficient with it as we possibly can. So we have 10 house rules for energy efficiency. Very basic, very straightforward stuff. None of it's rocket science. It's all about things like making sure the lights are off in the storerooms and the changing rooms, the fridge door is shut properly, counters don't get left on too late. Where we do have distribution board monitoring or the ability to have some sub-metering within locations, that is a golden ticket, because that gives us an opportunity to understand how much energy we are using to generate our sales. So the example there on the board, on the screen, is we did this across RBS Group, which is now called NatWest. But we had distribution board monitoring. We worked with RBS on this as a trial across 3 locations. And we actually had on the main consumer distribution board in the kitchen, each line tends to be 1 line per piece of equipment because it's all quite big stuff. We could track the amount of energy used for each item. And that fed through to a dashboard. And I could look at the dashboard virtually in real time. There's about a 10-15 minute lag. So for example, I could sit in the office in Reading and I could see what time the counters were switched on at RBS in Gogarburn, just outside Edinburgh. And whilst we weren't checking up on anybody, and it wasn't about that, it was about understanding. And I'll tell you a little story where that really helped us to drive a reduction. Every morning, the porter was coming into the building, putting his bike in the car park, and then on his way through, was actually coming through the building, through the restaurant, into the kitchen area. He was actually walking through and thinking he was doing everybody a favor by switching on all the counters. This was at 6 a.m. And what he didn't realize, because we didn't realize, because if we hadn't been tracking it, we wouldn't have known that the counters were being switched on at 6 a.m., but actually breakfast wasn't starting till 7:30. So we could have actually switched the counters on at 7:15 or 7 o'clock to make sure they're nice and warm and everything else. But we're probably looking at 10-15 minutes warming up time. So actually we changed that. and he changed his routine. He would come in through the restaurant, see some deliveries in, and then come back out and still switch them on in time for everybody else to come in and be able to deliver a great service at breakfast time. So it just shows what you can measure, you can manage. It's a really old adage, but it couldn't be more true. Not that many locations actually have metering, but when there's a refurbishment happening, and I was talking to somebody just the other day, we've got a big refurbishment coming up, and they came to me and asked me for my views, and I said the first thing on the list has got to be a level of sub-metering when it's all being put in, and then we can really manage, particularly with energy costs where they are, and with everybody's net zero aspirations, reducing emissions. Equipment maintenance, this is teaching to the converted, but absolutely is so important. From dripping taps to cleaning the jets that are on the gas burner, which you'll have all seen where the gas burner is burning orange, and that's because there's a little bit of burnt food or carbon stuck in the jet, which is allowing too much oxygen to burn. So the temperature of the flame is low, so people turn the gas up to compensate. Making sure that the fridge seals are working properly, you can actually shut the door properly, the locks are working, the light switches are working, and so on. All of that planned preventative maintenance is incredibly efficient, incredibly important to allow a level of efficiency and also prolong the life of that individual piece of equipment. Onto waste, which I'm sure, as everybody knows, is a huge part of the impact of any hospitality business. I would say probably, I mean, the infographic on the left-hand side, that is like the Bible. It is the waste hierarchy, and it absolutely demonstrates the most environmentally preferable method. And it's something you can always refer back to with every single thing you're looking at within the operation when it relates to waste. The most important thing to remember, as far as I'm concerned, and when I talk, I always say this, is a systematic approach, not knee-jerk. So, and what I'm referring to, as you probably may guess, is actually I'm referring to single-use plastic. From 13 minutes of Blue Planet 2 in 2017, the end of 2017, created an unbelievable groundswell of views, opinions, thoughts, everybody saying get rid of single-use plastic. Absolutely, completely, some of the pictures are horrendous, some of the stories we hear are horrendous, but it's about understanding what is right and what is wrong. Plastic is an amazing product. It is light, it is flexible, it's hygienic, it is low energy to make it. It is fully recyclable in so many areas. It reduces food waste, etc., etc., etc. When it's in the wrong place, it is bad and will create horrendous problems with pollution, impacting the natural world. You see the pictures of in the oceans and so on. But actually, for example, majority of ocean plastic is from fishing gear, not from bottles and plastic, not from bottles and food packaging materials. So it was slightly taken out of it was slightly exaggerated, and because it was so emotive, so many people jumped on it. Absolutely, we need to be reducing the amount of single-use plastic. We need to be reducing the amount of single-use everything, not just plastic. Generally speaking, swapping out one single-use material for another is largely futile and actually doesn't help, because within every single material, there are pluses and minuses. Some have got more impact in one area and less in another, and more in one and less in another. So actually, generally speaking, it's very, very nuanced as to what is the right and what is the wrong solution. For example, if you were deciding that you wanted to use a single-use compostable item, such as any type of PLA, polylactide, plant starch, plastic, bagasse, whatever it may be, actually that may not be the right solution, because unless you've got the right waste stream in terms of a commercial composting, in-vessel composting, it won't be the right thing for you. It can actually lead to more challenges through contamination of recycling waste streams, which could potentially mean that you could lose your entire recycling waste stream. But the waste hierarchy is so important. When we're looking at waste, clearly the best thing that you can possibly do is not have waste in the first place. So avoid or prevent in the first place. If you can't prevent or avoid the waste in the first place, you can reduce, and you might be able to do a bit of both. So for example, if we're looking at takeaway cups as an example, paper cups, overall the global impact of paper cups is absolutely minute. It makes up 0.2% of the waste of waste produced commercially. It is absolutely tiny, but it is absolutely visible. It is everywhere. People view it. It is very emotive. And so that doesn't mean we shouldn't be tackling it. Absolutely should. But sometimes actually getting rid of a paper cup might actually be worse. And that's what we need to try and avoid, is making sure that whatever we move to is not making it worse. So if you wanted to remove paper cups from your business, you might be able to, or you might be able to only do it partially. So we're encouraging people to use reusables if they're drinking coffee within the restaurant or the hospitality space or the meeting spaces, but paper cups might need to be used for takeaway, because actually those individuals aren't going to necessarily come back, so they can't bring a reusable back. It may be the only solution you have. So you haven't avoided completely, but you have reduced. And that's what we should be always looking back to, how we can approach all of those different waste streams and waste areas. Probably when I'm asked what is the most important thing you should do when it comes to waste management and waste management systems on a site, is I say you should be collaborating with the waste management company and with the facilities company, making sure that everything that we have on site, there is an aligned waste stream and there is the right way of actually dealing with that piece of waste. It is really, really important. If we can't do it, then we either need to be changing the product, or we actually need to be changing the waste stream. But either way, ideally, we need to be aligning those waste streams. Food waste is an area that is it's enormous in terms of impact, morally, and so all the cost-wise, energy-wise, emissions-wise. But from food waste, we started measuring our food waste or looking at food waste when we actually got involved with WRAP in 2012, when we joined the Hospitality and Food Service Agreement. And we've been, from that, we implemented our own food waste management system in 2014. This was really, it's our own system. So we spent about 15,000 upgrading our own accounts platform, which is called Evolution. And then every single location in the whole of the business now measures their food waste into plate waste, production waste, and spoilage waste. They measure it in kilos and then add it to the Evolution platform. That pulls through the food and beverage purchases number, and then we get a food waste percentage. So we have, as you can see there from the pie chart, spoilage waste, plate waste, and production waste. The plate waste is everything that we have sold but not consumed. So that is everything that may be off the hospitality, off the customers' plates. Production waste is everything that we have produced but not sold. So that can be counter waste, deli bar, it can be salad bar, it can be from hospitality, and it can also be from the kitchen in terms of bones, peelings, trimmings, etc. Spoilage waste is fairly obvious. It is anything that has been spoiled, it's out of date, it's been damaged, it's been burnt, it's been overseasoned. For whatever reason, it's been spoiled. And ideally, we should always be striving to reduce spoilage waste to as near to zero as possible. In the real world, that's very unlikely, because there will always be some elements of packaging that's been damaged or whatever it may be. But actually, that demonstrates that an area we should always be focused on very much. The numbers on the left-hand side are numbers up until the end of April this year from 2014. So you can see the enormous savings and the massive reduction of 41% reduction year to year ever since we've been doing this, which actually accounts to nearly 8,000 tons of food waste saved. Huge disposal costs. The disposal costs are your costs, because we work in your building with your waste streams and your utilities. So that's saving over £2.2 million of our clients' money. and also saving nearly 400,000 in energy for our clients. That clearly has a huge carbon reduction as well. But overall, we're looking at the carbon impact of food waste at 9.1 kilos of CO2 per kilo of food, equivalent to driving around 61 kilometers. If food waste was a country, it would be the third biggest emitter after America and China. It is that huge, because when we're looking at it, we're looking at it from a whole life. So 7.8 kilos of that is before it even reaches your premises. And that's farm, production, packaging, most of which is actually happening before the farm gate. And then the rest of it's 1.3 is actually usage and disposal. You can see there the enormous carbon saving, 69,000 tons. That's a straight calculation across of amount of food times 9.1 kilos per kilo. And just to put that in a slightly normal terms, equivalent of cars off the road and equivalent numbers of trees planted per year, or how much carbon would be sequestered by that number of trees per year. You can see on the graph along the bottom, no prizes for guessing where March 2020 is, but actually you can see that, and you can slightly also see how our business is slowly improving. But pre to COVID, you could actually see that our food costs were going up as we grow as a business, and our food waste in relative terms was continuing to fall. Sustainability and provenance. So provenance of food. You probably are aware of BaxterStorey's approach to buying local, seasonal produce. We have a decentralized supply chain, which I'll come on to on the next slide. But the importance of buying smaller, buying locally, buying seasonally, fresh food, cooked from scratch, empowering our chefs and managers to buy pretty much what they want from where they want, obviously within supply chain parameters, but also developing their own menus, their own recipes, creates a huge amount of passion at the front end, which develops a real love and care for what they're delivering to you as our customers every day. Also enhances farm profitability. Smaller suppliers tend to have a lesser impact on the environment because it's a smaller scale of production. Stability of commodity price. God, I wish we had that at the moment. Prosperous farming communities, reduced transportation, although just as a footnote to that, on average, transportation only accounts for around 7% of total footprint of a product, and improved quality of ingredients. It's coming local, it's in season, it's at the top of its growing cycle, and it's great stuff because it comes to you really, really quickly. So I was talking about centralized supply chain. So we have a decentralized supply chain. And what I do is I've mapped this out. And this is just a random example of what I've done. We look after Surrey Research Park, which is part of the University of Surrey. We look after the cafe on the park. And this is how we map their road miles from their suppliers. And the idea is that we map it against a centralized distribution system, which is a bit more of a, shall we say, a more corporate approach. So decentralized, our system comes from farm stroke producer to a supplier or wholesaler and then into the location. And a centralized distribution comes from a farm, and for the sake of these calculations, I use the same suppliers, so that it's like for like, to a supplier wholesaler, to a consolidation hub in the center. In this, for example, it's actually in the Midlands, in Tamworth, and then out to a regional distribution hub, and then into a location. Not only is that trunking up and down the country, but it also means that it's actually 1 or 2 days later that would arrive. On average, and this is for as I say, for the Surrey Research Park, that demonstrated, and the calculations are all there, it's a nearly 90% reduction on road miles and a nearly 92% reduction on emissions. That's based on the vans and the lorries on the road. So we will have probably smaller vehicles because they're smaller local, doing small distances between the supplier and the location. And the other system, they will actually have those suppliers delivering into a central hub, and then them being trunkered all the way up and down the country, repalletized out to a regional distribution center, and then back into location, possibly twice a week on one lorry, on a multi-temperature lorry, and that's how it was delivered. And I just wanted to demonstrate that because it's a very different system. I'm not criticizing the other system, it's just different to us. And this is the way we work and the way we will always work. So the road ahead is, well, really exciting, to be honest. We've been through what I would call a perfect storm. You know, we've had COVID, Brexit, COVID, probably less of an impact with Brexit, certainly on sustainability of produce, but certainly from a COVID perspective, COP26 was a huge focusing moment for everybody, for all businesses everywhere to really focus, really taking time to look back on the Paris Climate Change Agreement in 2015, how that was moving forward. And then we all experienced COVID, quieter skies, quieter roads, experienced nature. I think we all became a little bit more in touch with our food. We were maybe eating more as a family, spending more time over food, planning your menus, because you couldn't go to the shops every day. You had to plan what you were having, which made everyone a little bit more aware. So actually, RAP reported food waste domestically actually went down during COVID because people were planning a little bit more, making sure they're eating their leftovers and etc. But it is an amazing time to focus sustainability, and I'm sure David, who's on the call, will recognize that sustainability has never been a more focused. It is absolutely at top of the tree and pretty much everybody's tree. Food EQ is our approach to plant protein and reducing the amount of meat and dairy we consume. This originated from our work with Forum for the Future from 2015. We were working on the Protein Challenge 2040, based on the premise that by 2040, 9 billion people on the planet, the amount of meat and dairy we consume is not sustainable, given that the impacts of all of the ruminants, particularly the ruminants, the cow, the cattle, and the sheep, and so on. But 95% of global soy production is actually fed to livestock, and soy is a major contributor to deforestation. So you can see with land use change and the requirements to sequester carbon, deforestation is not the way to go. And if that means we can't grow the soy, we need to be looking at other alternatives, whether that's insect protein to feed to animals. I don't think personally that we'll ever get that within the human diet because we're a bit too squeamish. Certainly not in the West, but certainly for animal feed, that is a real possibility and opportunities going forward. So food EQ was all around reducing the amount of meat. We're taking that a stage further as we've come out of COVID, and we're relaunching our approach to pretty much everything, as everybody is. Food EQ is now about holistic sustainable diets. That's taking into account obviously meat and dairy and carbon emissions, but also animal welfare, soil quality, biodiversity, etc. Really looking to every corner of sustainable diets and making sure we're supporting that as a business. I mentioned our ESG strategy framework across WSH. Well, we've been working since September with a business called Simply Sustainable, helping us to reach out to over 500 different stakeholders to understand and develop an ESG framework across the whole of the business. We've done that. We're actually getting to a point where actually the initial framework has been signed off by the WSH board. This is pulling in all of the strands for all of the different operating companies. So across environment, social, and governance. Across each of those dimensions, we've got 38 targets, overarching WSH targets, and then each operating business, BaxterStorey, Benugo, CSEs, Portico, etc., will develop their own targets and strategies to feed in to the overall. All of that is underpinned by the Sustainable Development Goals, which has been a real passion of mine ever since we joined UKSSD back in 2015. The business, as I mentioned before, BaxterStorey signed the business ambition for 1.5 degrees in May 2021. that joined us on the race to zero, committed us to a science-based target approach to net zero. Our targets at the moment, and then we're aligning with the Zero Carbon Forum, is scope 1 and 2, net zero by 2030, and scope 3 by 2040. Scope 3 will probably account for 90 to 95% of our total footprint. And then interim targets of a 65% reduction on scope 1 and 2 by 2025, and a 65% reduction on scope 3 by 2030. Zero Carbon Forum I mentioned, it's about collaboration, working together. We have to work together. It is absolutely the key to our success, to everybody's success, in terms of mitigating the impacts of climate change and reducing the devastating climate impacts that we're seeing already, is to actually work together. IEMA Trained Champions is a fantastic opportunity to deliver into our business with real, whilst giving individuals that level of certified skills and training certificate that they can take on in maybe a different career direction, whichever they want to go. Carbon labeling, I haven't actually mentioned yet, but we are working really hard on carbon labeling at the moment. And what I mean by that is actually putting a carbon footprint on a sandwich, a main meal, a coffee, etc. We've been working across WSH on this. So you may have seen within our Benugo business, we have carbon neutral coffee. We were actually working with an organization called Climate Partner, where we calculated the footprint of every different type of coffee, every different type of milk, whether it's dairy milk or oat milk, almond milk, etc. And then we've actually offset. So actually, when you go into a Benugo and you see that on a QR code, you can actually scan it. It will explain how that's worked and how we've done that through. And we've offset the carbon emissions from that coffee through an Oxford mix. And that means 65% carbon reduction and 35% carbon removal. So actually that sequestration, if you remember, I mentioned regarding net zero, actually reducing, that's starting to take the plug out of the bath to start to remove carbon rather than actually just avoid it in the first place. But that is a really exciting project. We're actually working with a company called Nutritics on their program, which is called Foodprint. Nutritics seem very sensible to us because we already work with them. You may be aware, we work with them on allergen management and also calorie management on our labeling currently. So actually, just to add another element to that seems to make sense because everybody's familiar with the system. The bottom right-hand corner is 5 sustainability game changers for 2022. It's got an exclamation mark because actually it was originally 2020. Clearly the world changed and everything stopped. We actually launched this in 2019, was going great guns. And the idea was that we would have 5 game-changing activities, innovations every 6 months that we would nail on, that would be driven through the business without fail. So for example, we said we were going to ban small sachets of sauce. We were no longer going to have sachets of sauce. There's lots of alternatives. There's pumps and bowls and all different bottles and all different ways you can do that. You don't need to have these sachets. We were going to make sure that we were going to be looking at charging for disposables. We were encouraging reusables. We were only going to be recognizing that we need to sell bottled water as a commercial business, that we would make sure it was the best bottled water we could find in terms of a lightweight bottle is a British water, it was a high recyclable content, etc. And there's a development program to really drive that forward. All of those things were in place and we were making great guns. World changed and everybody went back to starting to use disposables because of perceived COVID safety fears around using reusable disposable cups, etc. That has changed. We're coming back out now. We've relaunched Game Changers and we're back on the track now to actually get 5 sustainability game changers entered into every 6 months. My last slide, apart from the Q&A slide, is just a little bit about benchmarking. Now, I make no apologies for flying the flag and say, yeah, it's great to win awards, because it absolutely is. And we all love it. And if we've had the opportunity to do that, then that's absolutely brilliant. That's how I know David from the Sustainable Business Katie Awards. But we won that in 2009. I've got to be a judge every year since. In fact, on the main KTs, the food service KTs, and also the hotel KTs as well, which is a great privilege and a great honour to get, I guess, to see some amazing work. But one of the main, whilst it's great to have that kudos and to win an award and win an award with other caterers, with other hospitality professionals, it's also brilliant to then measure yourself against other industries. So, for example, 2016, our Food Waste Cost in the Earth programme won what was then called the BIFM's awards in 2016, Impact on Sustainability. And in 2018, we won the ED Sustainability Leaders Awards, Sustainable Business of the Year. And in fact, the second and third were actually IKEA and Timberland. So what was fantastic about that for us is not only to win the award and have put a black tie on and drink some champagne, etc., which is great, but actually to measure ourselves and see, actually, we're up there with the big boys. We're actually, really fighting our corner, and we're actually doing a good job because we're measuring ourselves. And I think that is a really strong thing to remember, that is actually not just about the winning the award, it's actually measuring yourself against performance, against not only your competitors within your own sector, but also your peers in other businesses as well. So that's a really, really strong, and we're very, very proud of that. Whew, right, we're there. That is a whistle. Believe me, that is a whistle stop.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. That's the quickest you've ever done it in, and you're only 5 minutes over. I've never. You're always at least half an hour over. So thank you very much.
So, any questions at all? I was delighted to help. There were no questions during, but clearly delighted to answer anything that comes along as we go. I'm sure Alistair must have a question.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Video on. I always find it's challenging with the students, and I'm interested about the sort of the paper cups and all that sort of actually what is the impact is not as big as we think. What if there's one or two changes we could make? What would they be? Which will actually, the students may not see it, but actually, what do we need to address from a catering point, from a university point of view, catering point of view, which would make a difference, which perhaps we're not doing at the moment? Food waste is an interesting one.
I mean, food waste is a really good example, because it is probably the biggest impact area that you have can really affect on. The other is clearly meat and dairy. That's a difficult one because it depends on customers and how far you want to go. If you really wanted to have a huge impact, you would go meat-free, or you would have more food EQ, which is around reduced meat within a dish, or actually meat-free Mondays and so on. But that's something that's quite hard to do. So meat, dairy, food waste is enormous. Energy is enormous, clearly, particularly at the moment. Unfortunately, sometimes the focus isn't so much on energy, because whilst prices are going up considerably, it's still not that expensive in relative terms, in relative to other areas. So people don't tend to focus on switching the lights off and making sure this is shut and that's shut, and you're not switching the counter on too soon, because it's still relatively cheap. Even though it's around 20 to 25p a kilowatt, a kilowatt is still 1,000 watts. That is a lot of electricity and a lot of light burning time. So, when you add all of those together, that's absolutely huge. The elements that can make a big difference from a perception perspective is clearly, whilst actually not having an enormous impact in terms of overall footprint, is packaging, is moving away, encouraging the use of reusables. One thing I would say to caveat that is you have to make sure that when you're moving to reusables, it's not going to increase your overall impact, which it could do if you lose loads, if you use them and they break and you have to replace them. Actually, the impact could be higher. So you could be dealing with one issue and actually creating a bigger problem somewhere else. So it's a bit of a nuance, really. Reducing from a customer perception perspective is a great thing, but also some, like you said, and you're absolutely right, Alistair, some of the stuff you do back of house will actually have a bigger impact, but actually people don't know. And I'll give an example of if you ban air freighted food, that would be amazing. Because if you ban, if you're looking at a gram of produce, that's 90% of produce is shipped around the world on boats by water. And if you're transporting by ship, on average, you're looking at 0.02 grams of CO2 per gram of product. If you're actually flying that product, it's 8 grams per gram. It is absolutely massive, 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 massive. And the main reason why people would have air freighted produce is because they're buying out of season. So, for example, asparagus. Now, we've just come into the end of our asparagus season in the UK, and the asparagus here is brilliant. One could argue, okay, we don't have asparagus for the rest of the year. That's it. If we do, we have to make sure it comes from Spain, at the maximum North Africa, and it comes here by boat. Problem is, with a lot of the products that come by plane, they do that because they're perishable, they're short life. So it might be, you could go into Tesco's now and you'd probably find blueberries, and they probably come from Chile or Peru. I would guarantee they'd come by air because there isn't enough shelf life by boat. Whereas bananas, pineapples, things like that come unripe by a boat. They're ripe by the time they get here, or they're ripened here. So actually, it's those products, and that's where we need to say, yeah, absolutely, we buy seasonally, or we only want to do seasonal produce. Is actually to put your money where your mouth is and say, no, we actually mean it. We're not going to do blueberries unless they are frozen British blueberries. We can do that, but actually, that would make a massive difference. And because how many customers would recognize that, notice that, maybe not, but if you do, it's not a problem. You just make sure you tell the story. This is why we're doing this. Not a problem.
Interesting. Because sometimes it's a lack of knowledge, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is. You're absolutely right. And an interesting point on that is actually it is lack of knowledge, but actually sometimes a little bit of knowledge is dangerous as well.
Yeah.
Because people read a headline or hear a snippet see it on something on Twitter, or read a headline probably in the Daily Mail or something, and they think, oh my God, this. And actually it's not the case, because normally the stories are more nuanced than that.
Yes, it's a bit like our takeaway boxes, which we had the old polystyrene ones, and we went to bio, wherever it is, but actually I know where they go. They go into the wrong bin, and it's a waste of time. But we did it purely because it was politically the right thing to do.
Yeah. So the only upside of say the gas box, which I think you're talking about, it's actually made from sugarcane.
Yeah. So
it's made from a waste product. So from a circularity perspective, it's made from a waste product. But that waste product absolutely sugarcane. It's absolutely not from the UK.
No, exactly. That was my issue.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Has anybody else got any questions for Mike, following on from that really interesting presentation? Thank you for sharing your initiatives. It's really, really good to hear what's being done. Just open up just to see if anybody else has got anything. David?
Yeah, just thank you. I was preaching to the converted here a bit, but no, very insightful, extremely thorough. The lengths you go to, which is commendable. Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
And likewise yourself. I mean, you guys do a brilliant job.
Yeah, but like you said, the last couple of years it's been tricky, hasn't it? We're just kind of working our way back out of it, aren't we? And but we'll come out bigger and better and stronger, and have hopefully better.
Absolutely, I think this is definitely, as I said, I think it's. I mean, I'm sure you see it all the time. It's given us a new focus. ESG, sustainability, sustainable development, whatever you want to call it, has never been right up there. I mean, I see it now. I'd probably say, 10 years ago, environmental management, sustainability would be in a sales bid, and it would probably be worth 2%. Now you're looking probably, number one on the agenda quite often. 50%, 40% of the marks. I mean, it's huge. It is absolutely huge. It is, and it's great, and it's great to see. And I think that not only did COVID and everything else bring that about as time has changed, but I think that COP26 really gave business focus. Although it didn't actually achieve much in itself, it actually gave, it put pressure on a lot of businesses and institutions. And then it's self-fulfilling, isn't it? The more businesses take it on, the more other businesses have to take it on because they see their competitors and certain moves on. As long as that continues to the end game, which I think it will, from what I understand from talking to friends, colleagues, peers, etc. You know, it's the focus is enormous, absolutely enormous.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so as I say, today's session has been recorded. We'll be sharing that with you shortly. We will just send out an email to everybody that's attended, just copying in Mike and John. If anybody has any further questions that they want to reach out to them with, you'll have their contact details there to refer back to. Thank you so much for today's session, Mike and John. Really appreciate it. And I will end the call there. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Bye.